Hi guys, I have some news. Since the last video, you may have noticed I've been a little bit quiet, and that is because I have given birth to my third baby. I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you all about the build up to my birth, what happened in my birth, and also how I've been recovering postpartum as well. As many of you know, it's my third baby and my third labour, and as an obstetrics and gynecology doctor, I feel like it's always such an eye-opening, it's an eye-opening experience for everyone, but especially for me, being on the other side, going through this journey, experiencing labour, contractions, all the kind of sensations and the feelings from the other side is such an informative experience. It always shapes and changes my practice as well. I would say about this labour, it was a very good experience, but it was not maybe the experience I expected. I didn't enjoy a lot of the build up as much. I had a difficult time in the last few weeks of pregnancy, nothing major, but equally, I'm not going to sit here and paint this beautiful rosy picture of this glamorous and gorgeous birth. I think my birth story was probably not the most dramatic and also not the most kind of beautiful, blissful experience either, but it's my experience, and that's why I thought if anyone is interested that I would share it with you. So let me start at the beginning. I should also say, obviously, somewhere in this house is my little 1 week old or 6-day-old baby, so he's having a little snooze downstairs with dad, but so I thought I'd film this video while he is snoozing, but he might join me in here at some point. Anyway, let's get started. So what was happening? I had a fairly straightforward pregnancy, third pregnancy, low risk. I only saw midwives, so if you're watching this from another country, I live in the UK, and if you have an uncomplicated pregnancy, you don't necessarily need to see doctors. And again, a bit abnormal for me as an obstetrics doctor to kind of go through most of pregnancy without really seeing any doctors, but that's what I had. And I had a lovely community midwife who I got to see the same person mostly at most of my visits. Coming to the end of pregnancy, I guess what I'd expected in my mind, I've had 2 vaginal births that were straightforward, uncomplicated. One arrived on her due date, kind of labour had started 2 days before, but arrived on her due date was the first one. Second one arrived about a week and a half early, so 38 plus 4 weeks. He also came spontaneously, but both of them came after having had sweeps, cervical sweeps. So I kind of felt when I was getting towards the end of pregnancy, what I was expecting was to give birth somewhere around 38, 39 weeks, have a sweep, baby would be born. I finished work at 38 weeks, everything seemed to be fine. I was obviously very uncomfortable, feeling more heavy, in more discomfort. It was also Christmas, or the week leading up to Christmas, and I was just desperate to get labour going. I had a sweep just out from our first sweep. Sebby came to join me, 2 centimetres dilated. We've had a little bit of Braxton Hicks sore contractions the last few days. Maybe that's why we're 2 centimetres, but either way, we're feeling positive. Sweep was possible, and we'll see what happens over the next few hours. I felt really positive because, as you may know from my other videos, when we are assessing how close someone is to labour and maybe trying to either do a sweep to get them into labour or assessing whether induction is a good idea for them, we often look at the cervix and see what it's doing and say whether or not it's favourable, whether it's likely to go into labour soon. And so we look at things like how hard the cervix is, position of it, so if it's very posterior, if it's up at the back, or if it's moved forward, if it's started to kind of shorten and dilate. So my cervix kind of was giving off lots of positive signs. So I really thought after that sweep, I was like, right, great, gonna go into labour. This was at like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and at like 4 o'clock I started to have more painful contractions, was doing all the things to get labour going, doing lots of walking, bouncing on my birthing ball, and the contractions started to build up, and I was like, oh, this is actually going to work. This is great. I was sitting having dinner, but I was like, oh, they're getting a bit more frequent. They're getting a bit stronger. My husband was supposed to go to like this big dinner, big Christmas dinner with all his friends that they'd organise. I was like, you can't go. I think I'm going into labour. It's my third one. It might happen really quickly. So I think he was like, are you sure? You look comfortable, but okay, like it was quite far away, so it was a bit of a risk for him to go. He didn't go, he stayed with me, and the contractions kind of continued. They were coming every 3 or 4 minutes for about 2 hours. But I knew, having done it before, having been through labour before, that I was coping very well. They weren't that painful. They were kind of like there. My whole tummy was tightening. It felt a little bit crampy. We kind of talk about the difference between contractions and Braxton Hicks, but actually it's not always as clear cut as we say. We sort of say a Braxton Hicks is a tightening where the uterus tightens and releases, and you can tighten for a couple of minutes even, and it can feel a bit uncomfortable, but it's not painful, whereas contractions, the main difference is they're painful and they become regular. But mine were kind of somewhere in between the two. They were becoming more painful, but I was coping really well and it wasn't increasing, and then they started to space out again. And sort of I got all the labour bag ready, and I was thinking maybe in the next couple of hours we'll be ready to go into hospital. But as it was kind of spacing out again, I was like, well, I'll get into bed and just see what happens. And suddenly I woke up and it's 7 a.m. and there was no contractions. Everything had gone away. Everything had died off. And I was obviously a bit disappointed, but I was like, okay, it's early days. And essentially that basically continued for the next 2 weeks. I had loads of sweeps. I think I had 4 in the run up and during the Christmas period, because every night I was having really painful contractions that were building up, getting all excited, getting all expecting to go into labour. One night even, I think after about 3-4 hours of timing the contractions or timing these tightenings, they were coming every 2 to 3 minutes. I was kind of really struggling to breathe, trying to breathe through them. I thought, this is labour. We even went into hospital one night, and the midwife examined me and was like, still, it's 2 centimetres and I don't think you're in labour. And even by this point, again, the contractions had spaced out and they died off again, and we just went back home. So after 2 weeks of all of this, I was just getting absolutely exhausted. I wasn't sleeping at night and I was frustrated. And you know, anyone that's been at this point in pregnancy where, especially when you have lots of false starts to labour, you realise like it drags on forever. Your body is exhausted, your body is sore, the head was so low, and at each of the sweeps I was getting given positive information. So the cervix is changing, it's got a bit softer, it's come further forward, it's easy to feel the waters, so the waters could be broken or could break at any minute. But I wasn't going into labour, and you know, I was trying to stay super positive. I really want to avoid an induction of labour like everyone does, I think, and to avoid intervention, because, you know, as much as I might be a doctor, I didn't want to have lots of things done to me unless it was necessary. I would be open to anything that happened, but at the same time, you know, my preference was just to try and let things happen spontaneously. Okay, Seb, where are we up to in our labour diaries? Give us the update.
Well, it's the 24th of December. Brooke has been labouring for 6 whole days, and we're no nearer to having a new child. Are we, Brooke?
How are you feeling about the situation, Seb?
I've got lots of cramps, I'm in agony.
Your back's hurting, your tummy's hurting, you're not sleeping.
It's very hard for the man in this.
But I was just getting exhausted, and of course I've got 2 kids at home as well. And again, when you've got lots of false labour, each time that you think you might be going into hospital, you've got to arrange cover overnight. Who's going to be with your kids if you need to go into hospital and your partner needs to come in with you? So we had parents staying over, my in-laws staying over, different friends who we'd had to say, you know, if we call you at 4 a.m, would you mind coming round to be with the kids while we go to hospital, and everything, and kind of had a plan every night that wasn't necessary. Anyway, after all these false starts and what we call kind of a long latent phase, eventually, I was the day of my due date, and I said, okay, it's my due date, I've got here, but how much longer am I going to go? And obviously, from a midwife perspective, from the NICE guidelines perspective, we wait up to 10 days past someone's due dates before considering them as post dates and recommending an induction of labour. But equally, I was kind of in this in-between space for ages, and I was just getting frustrated and upset, and sort of the midwife was like, well, you know, I wouldn't do anything different at this stage. You could just keep waiting. You can have another sweep if you want. I said, fine. This will be my last sweep. It's okay.
Monster's crying. I didn't know you weren't in there.
Oh, really? Yeah. Hello. Okay, as expected, we have a little guest to join us. Anyway, where was I? So a midwife says, would you like one more sweep? I said yes, and if this doesn't work, that's it, I'm done, and I'm just going to wait until my induction, whenever that's going to happen. So she did the sweep, went out, walked for about 4 hours, in different places, which was killing me because my pelvis really hurt. But we did lots of walking up and down hills, up and down stairs. Slowly, I was having some irregular contractions that felt a little bit stronger than in the other days, but it wasn't much. But eventually they were building, and again this was quite early in the morning, like 9 o'clock, and by about 4-5 o'clock I was having some contractions. I was sitting on the birthing ball, but I also realised that I hadn't felt the baby move really all day. Even from when I woke up in the morning, I realised I hadn't really felt the baby move very much. I'd felt some movements, so I wasn't like overly worried, and I'd been to the midwife, we'd heard the heartbeat, and she'd asked me, as we always do, you know, baby's movement's okay, and I'd said, I've definitely felt them this morning. I feel like there's been some less, but I've felt them since I've been here, so I was kind of in this in-between of, are they reduced or not? But after a few hours, I kind of thought to myself, actually, I do think it's reduced. And as we always say to everybody, I had to go in. And I've never had to go into the hospital with reduced movements before, but I had to kind of take myself seriously and follow the advice I would give to anybody else. So even though I kind of felt some movements, I felt they were different than before. Went in, had a CTG.
So here we are, Barnet General, 3rd of January. CTG time.
And that was normal, and of course once they put the monitor on, baby was moving loads, and I was having more contractions, and the machine was really picking up those contractions as well. I said, I can't keep doing this with this back and forth of not knowing whether I'm in labour or not, or going into labour. I think we should just break the waters, because the waters were easy to access. I was already having contractions, and I felt like we should just keep this labour going forward. So they got me a room on the labour ward. We went for another little walk while we waited for that availability, and actually again it really increased. The contractions started coming more frequently. They were about every 3 minutes, and so by the time I got into the room to have the waters broken, I was definitely in active labour. The midwife examined me. I was 4 centimetres, which is active labour, and she broke the waters. From then on, everything went very quickly. I got up after I'd had a bit of monitoring, had a shower. I was basically in agony with each contraction in the shower, so I asked for my epidural, which got put in only about half an hour or so after I'd had the waters broken, which normally I wouldn't recommend to somebody else, because I'd say you can walk around, get the contractions going, but they were so strong, so frequent. You put the epidural in, and then within about half an hour after that, it never really worked, in the sense that I never felt complete relief from the epidural. I was still feeling everything, and I just felt this pressure and this overwhelming urge to push. And the midwife examined me. It was about 6 centimetres. This was about 45 minutes after the waters had been broken. I was about 6 centimetres, and she said, don't push, you can't push, because my cervix wasn't fully open. So I was trying to breathe through it, use all the gas and air, and change positions, stand up, sit on the ball. Again, there's that myth that once you have an epidural, you can't move, but I definitely could. I was able to stand up, I was able to sit on the ball and move around. For about another sort of 15 minutes or so, I need to push. I need to get rid of this pain somehow. I need to push. And also the baby's heart rate was dropping with each contraction, with each time I was in pain, the heart rate was dropping. And we often know that's when baby has moved down the birth canal and is kind of getting squeezed more. But obviously when you start seeing the baby's heart rate drop on the monitor, it was worrying for the midwives and difficult for me to not listen to and to not pay attention to the monitors, because I know what all of it means. And I said to her, I was trying to tune everything out. I was trying to be the patient. But it's difficult because I work in a high-risk birth environment, and I'm very used to seeing, you know, these worrying traces on the CTG and acting on them. And I knew what my colleagues would be thinking when they see the trace like that. But luckily, she said, let me check one more time. And I was fully dilated. The head had come right down, and we got pushing straight away.
That's it, come on. Bit more, bit more, bit more. Brilliant. This is it now. This is it. Keep going. That's it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
And he came out, so he was born about 2 hours after the waters had been broken. So actually, all in all, it was pretty quick in the end. I was really lucky to have such a lovely midwife and team of doctors around me. I was in a hospital where I previously worked, and I felt very supported. And it was actually all in all a great experience, although I would have liked less pain. And I know that other people would say, oh, we don't call the contractions painful, we call them surges, you can call them whatever you like. To me it was pain, and I was happy to have the options of the painkillers that I took, but I'm not sure it ever really worked this time. And we were home after one night. I was able to do straight away the golden hour. So he was delivered onto me. We had time for skin to skin and basically started feeding straight away. The benefit of being a third time mum was that I knew what to do with the breastfeeding, but I also did notice straight away that, like my other two kids, he had a tongue tie. So we managed to latch, we managed to get that going, but within a day or so I realised how painful his latch was, and also that he was not feeding very efficiently, not swallowing the milk very regularly, and feeding for ages and ages and just not seeming satisfied. So I knew we had to do something about the tongue tie. And luckily there's a great tongue tie practitioner nearby me, and I had the number for her already, and we were able to get seen within a couple of days of discharge. I've had this experience before, so I just knew to get it sorted. And my one recommendation to anyone who's struggling with breastfeeding after birth is to see a lactation consultant. You can get breastfeeding support. Sometimes breastfeeding is not as easy as it kind of looks and it's made out to be, and each of my experiences has been different, and I've needed support for each of them. So it's not just like you've done it before so you should be able to do it again. Breastfeeding support is out there, and I really encourage you to access it. So apart from that, we came home after one night in hospital, and we've recovered very well. I've really been leaning into the postpartum experience this time. I am one of those people that's usually just get up and go. Go, make plans, get out the house, go for walks, set yourself a load of tasks for work to do, videos to film, etc. And actually this time I've really tried to give myself space and time to recover, and also to just enjoy the baby and being home. And it's January, so it's freezing here. It's not the best time to be going out for walks with a newborn. Even the house I feel is cold all the time, so trying to keep him wrapped up in blankets and warm. And so we've just been a lot of time in bed and watching Netflix, and trying to remind myself to really nestle into the fourth trimester, pulling up the drawbridge, which means not having loads and loads of visitors this time, just staggering everyone who means really well, but I don't need everyone around at the same time where, you know, you're stressed about how you look and have we made enough cups of tea. So that is my birth experience and birth journey. I would love to hear if you've got any questions or anything that I've missed out. As I say, I think I'm really lucky in having a good experience, although it wasn't what I expected it to be. And I hope if you are pregnant at the moment, that actually hearing a story that maybe isn't the scariest birth story, that isn't the most fluffy and perfect birth either, maybe makes you feel more positive. Because what I would always say to anyone going into birth is your story and your experience is yours, and it's going to be unique and different to everybody else's. And you can gear yourself up to a perfect water birth surrounded by candles and aromatherapy, but it may not work out for you and you end up with an emergency cesarean. And the hard thing to deal with in that early postnatal period is kind of trauma and letting go of what your expectations were. Whereas if you come into birth, you come into labour without any expectations, just knowing that at the end of it you're going to meet your baby, I think is helpful, and maybe hearing some normal and realistic birth stories. So anyway, I'm going to get back to finishing off this little one, and I'll speak to you soon.